1st of May. Happy 1st of May. Today's 1st May. We celebrate. That's why I'm wearing this t-shirt. Maybe you've seen me wear it before. So welcome or welcome back. Oh, the Christians are at it again. Can't have a single day off. Welcome or welcome back. I'm Alex. And if you've been around, you know that I'm terrible at introducing myself. But this time I remembered. So if you stuck around until this point, you've probably seen the first part of this vlog, which is the bookstores in Vienna. And now I will talk about the books that I did not buy. More precisely, we are pretending that I didn't buy them, as you will see from the video. So I didn't buy any of these books. I didn't spend any money in the bookstores. And you're just gonna go with the flow of that statement. In the video, you've probably seen that the first bookstore that I was in is Shakespeare & Co. I should point out that Shakespeare & Co. is not in any way affiliated with Shakespeare & Co. in Paris. I've been to this bookstore before. Every time I went to Vienna, I would visit it. Last time I was there was in 2016. It has remained still awesome as it was before. They have amazing collection of books, and I really enjoyed browsing through their bookshelves. And my goal for that day was to buy one book per each bookstore, which of course, as you know, I was very successful in. Even more than that, because I didn't buy any books in those bookstores. So let us continue with this illusion while I present supposedly the books that I didn't buy, or the books that I really didn't buy. First one, well, I knew one thing. Every time I go to Austria, I always want to buy at least, or not buy, excuse me, I don't want to buy one book that is written by an Austrian author. Last time I was there, I bought a book by Elfriede Jelinek, and this time I also bought another book by Elfriede Jelinek. It's called Lust. The first one I bought is called Wonderful Times. Highly recommend it. I will insert the book cover on this side here. This book is, the blurb says, in a quaint Austrian ski resort, things are not quite what they seem. Hermann, the manager of a paper mill, has decided that sexual gratification begins at home, which means Gertie, his wife, and property. Gertie is not asked how she feels about the use Hermann puts her to. She's their receptacle into which Hermann pours his juices. The long-suffering and battered Gertie thinks that she has found her savior and love in Michael, a student who rescues her after a day of vigorous use by her husband. But Michael is on his way up the Austrian political ladder, and he is, after all, a man. A dazzling performance, Lust confirms Elfriede Jelinek's position as the most corrosive chronicler of the War of the Sexes. I read the blurb and I just could not resist it. Of course, I resisted. I didn't buy this book. How many times should I repeat this to actually be convinced myself and to convince you? We shall see by the end of this video. I'm really looking forward to this. Like I said, the one novel that I read from her was really, truly beautiful to read. It was one of the books that analyzed the post-war Austria, the culture of denial of the Austrian participation in Holocaust, and the actual effect on families and the trauma that individuals bear that nobody is actually talking about. So that's the other book, not this one. So let me put this down. Where should I put it? Here. Okay, next one is Thomas Bernhard, Old Masters, a Comedy. I think somebody said that he's actually German or Austrian. Is he German with identity crisis? Oh, no, he was actually born in Netherlands and grew up in Salzburg and Vienna. He trained to be an actor and singer, but persistent ill health made these careers impossible. So maybe he's Dutch with identity crisis. One thing I've noticed recently is that I crave more stories that are about older people, people who are middle-aged or retired. I really want to read more about characters who have gone through this identity crisis, searching for themselves in their 20s. I'm kind of tired of those novels. So I decided to pick this one, and the blurb says, Old Masters is Thomas Bernard's devilishly funny story about the friendship between two old men. For over 30 years, Reger, a music critic, has sat on the same bench in front of Tintoretto painting in a Viennese museum, railing against contemporary society, his fellow men, artists, the weather, even the state of public lavatories. His friend Atzbacher has been summoned to meet him, and through his eyes we learn more about Reger and eventually the true purpose of their appointment. At once pessimistic and exuberant, rancorous and hilarious, Old Masters is a richly satirical portrait of the value of art and the tensions of humanity. I'm so looking forward to this. I actually want to read one of Sophie's favorite books, which is The Hearing Trumpet. Yes, The Hearing Trumpet. It's about an old woman who, I believe, cannot hear well, and her family is plotting to put her in a retirement home, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I remember. I remember Sophie talking many times about that book, and I really want to pick it up. And when I saw this one, it was something that really reminded me of that book. And I'm really looking forward to read about old grumpy men. That's what I need in my life now. Next one is, well, this one is unrelated to the country that I visited. The author is Fernando Pessoa, The Book of Disquiet, the complete edition. I read Pessoa's poetry many years ago in fragments published in different poetry magazines in Serbia. There was one poetry magazine called Poezia, which means poetry, and they had several of his poems in different issues. And that was the first time I encountered Pessoa. I was maybe 21, I think. Oh God, I sound old now. And I have read other books of his before, but I've never read The Book of Disquiet, and I would really love to read it. So I saw it and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely not buying this one. Written over the course of Fernando Pessoa's life, The Book of Disquiet was first published in 1982, pieced together from the thousands of individual manuscript pages left behind after his death in 1935. Now this fragmentary modernist masterpiece appears in a major new edition that unites Margaret Jewel Costa's celebrated translation with previously mixing texts, presented for the first time in order of composition and accompanied by facsimiles of the original manuscript, a mosaic of dreams and a hymn to the streets and cafes of 1930s Lisbon. The Book of Disquiet is an extraordinary record of the inner life of one of the century's most important writers. That's all I need to know. So this was the last book I got from Shakespeare and Co. And I got this cute little bookmark. And I also got another bookmark. You can buy them. They're not that expensive, but they're quite interesting, this one. It says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And a cat is responding, "Oh, just shut up." And I really like that they gave the cat, we actually look alike. We have the same Shakespeare haircut. I'm just missing the mustache. Look how cute. They're actually a really fun bookstore. You can find a lot of things. I found some other books that I also didn't want to buy, but those I really didn't buy. Next bookstore I visited was Chicklit, and it's a feminist bookstore. They mostly have books in, why am I holding this? They mostly have books in German, but they do have some selection in English. And often what happens in these bookstores that have a small selection of English books, they actually have a really, really good selection. And I found one book that I didn't buy. It's called Native Country of the Heart by Cherry Moraga or Moraja. Moraga. I'll go with Moraga. It says Native Country of the Heart. A memoir is at its core a mother-daughter story. The mother, Elvira, was hired out as a child along with her siblings by their own father to pick cotton in California's Imperial Valley. The daughter, Cherry Moraga, is a brilliant, pioneering queer Latina feminist. The story of these two women and of their people is wound together in an intimate memoir of critical reflection, deep personal revelation, and cultural loss. Poetically wrought and filled with insight into intergenerational trauma, Native Country of the Heart is a reckoning with white American history and piercing love letter from a fearless daughter to the mother she will never lose. I also never heard of this author, never heard of this book, and another goal that I had when I was there is not to buy books that I have never heard of before. So there we go. I didn't buy it in the end. Look at that. Finally, the third bookstore, actually, I didn't know about this one. A friend of mine that I was staying with recommended it. It's actually a bookstore that is focused mostly on Middle Eastern and North African literature. They have a lot of Palestinian authors. They are also a space where they organize different panels, book clubs dedicated to reading books from the region. But they also have different leftist books. You can find a lot of leaning publications regarding Black liberation and topics in that manner. It was interesting. I had a very, very nice conversation with the husband of the woman who actually runs the bookstore. I really enjoyed my time there. And again, I didn't buy these books, but you can believe whatever you want. The first one that I definitely could leave the bookstore without is Journal of an Ordinary Grief. This is a collection of poetry by Mahmoud Darwish. And this is actually the first collection of poetry of Mahmoud Darwish that I own. I have read some of his poems online. I never read a collection from cover to cover, so it's going to be an interesting experience. The blurb says, consider this book an essential primer of the gradual understanding of Palestine and its people. This collection of essays is one of the most effective, useful, and deeply moving witnessing of historical tragedy I have read. So it's a collection of essays, it's not poems. Hold on. They do sort of look like poems, but it could be some kind of... I'm quite intrigued now. Because when I lived through it, I didn't read the blurb. They look like kind of experimental form poetry, something between this kind of like prosaic form of writing poetry. Dervish Pierre Jory or okay, no, don't try French accent. No. The writing has an unsurpassed freshness, power, and exactly. Okay, let's do this again. The writing has an unsurpassed freshness, power, and awe exactly because it is poetry that happens to have justified margins. Dervish hungers to understand why such calamities have befallen his people and has a profound need for sharing, and succeeds brilliantly at both of these. This book should be on the reading list of every school in this country. Which country? Is it France? Probably. Does it say anything else? Yeah, there's another description here. Every beautiful poem is an act of resistance, asserts Dervish, both voice of the Palestinian people and one of the most transcendent poets of his generation. Mahmoud Dervish also wrote several remarkable volumes of autobiographical essays over the course of his life. First published in Beirut in 1973, these probing essays ask vital questions about the existentially complex realities the Palestinians in Israel face and the ambiguity of Dervish's own identity as an Israeli Palestinian. They call upon myth, memory, and language to delve into the poet's experience of house arrest, his encounters with Israeli interrogators, and the period he spent in prison. Meditative, lyrical, rhythmic, Dervish gives absence a vital presence in these linked essays. Journal is a moving and intimate account of the loss of homeland and, for many, of life inside the porous walls of occupation. No ordinary grief. I'm very happy with this non-purchase. Next one is Mother of Strangers by Suad Amiri. I had this novel on my radar for quite some time. I have it on my digital TBR on Storygraph. When I saw it, I was like, definitely not buying this one. At times darkly humorous and ironic, but also profoundly moving, Mother of Strangers, based on a true story, follows the lives of Subi, a gifted 15-year-old mechanic, and Shams, the 13-year-old student he hopes one day to marry. In 1947, the cosmopolitan city of Jaffa, with its open-air markets, lively cafes and cinemas overlooking the Mediterranean, and with a thriving orange export business in its bustling seaport, was a city where Muslims, Jews, and Christians had always lived peacefully together. But when the bombardment of the city begins in 1948, Jaffa becomes unrecognizable. Once vibrant neighborhoods are flattened, families are forcibly removed from their homes and often separated, and those who remain are in constant danger of arrest and incarceration. Most of the population will flee to Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, and Gaza. Suad Amiri has written a vivid and devastating account of a seminal moment in the history of the Middle East, the beginning of the end of Palestine, and a portrait of a city irrevocably changed. Can we say the history repeating itself? I don't think I need to say anything more. Next one is again a Palestinian author, because let's remember this bookstore is dedicated mostly to Palestinian authors, but they also have other authors. I also had this book on my list, My First and Only Love by Sahar Khalifeh. I read two of her novels before, Inheritance and Wild Thorns. Beautifully written novels. I'm familiar with her writing style. I really enjoy it. Although Inheritance, I read it, I believe it's been more than around 10 years, and I would maybe like to read it at some point because I vaguely remember it, but I remember the feeling that it left within me while I was reading it. So what is this book about? Nidal, after many decades of restless exile, returns to her family home in Nablus, where she had lived with her grandmother before the 1948 Nakba that scattered her family across the globe. She was a young girl when the popular resistance began, and through the bloodshed and bitter struggle, Nidal fell in love with freedom fighter Arabi. He was her first and only real love, him and all that he represented, Palestine in its youth, the resistance fighters in the hills, the nation as embodied in her family home and in the land. Many years later, Nidal and Arabi meet, and he encourages her to read her uncle Amin's memoirs. She immerses herself in the details of her family and national past and discovers the secret history of her absent mother. Filled with emotional urgency and political immediacy, Sahar Khalifeh spins an epic tale reaching from the final days of the British Mandate to today with clear-eyed realism and great imagination. So I guess the reason I spoke of the two novels of hers that I read before is because I'm really trying to acknowledge that she is a brilliant writer and recommend her work. It doesn't matter where you will start with it. I think whatever you read, you will be immensely grateful that you were able to acquire her work and immerse yourself in it. And finally, the last book I did not buy is The Queue by Basma Abdelaziz, and I think she is an Egyptian author, if I'm not mistaken. Hold on, let me see if there is some kind of short biography. This page is stuck. No, not here. Nope. The back, yes. Yes, she is an Egyptian author. It says Basma Abdelaziz is an Egyptian journalist and psychiatrist who treats torture victims at Cairo's Nadim Center, continuing her work even after the center was raided and closed by Egyptian authorities in February 2016. She has long been a vocal critic of government oppression in Egypt, has published several works of nonfiction, and earned the nickname The Rebel for her outspoken struggle against injustice, torture, and corruption. The Queue is her first book translated into English. She lives in Cairo. Translated by Elizabeth Jacquet. Me and my French. In an unnamed Middle Eastern city, a centralized authority known as the Gate has risen to power in the aftermath of the disgraceful events as failed popular uprising. Citizens are required to obtain permission from the Gate for even the most basic of their daily affairs. Who does this remind us of? Yet the building never opens and the queue in front of it grows longer and longer. People from all walks of life wait in the sun. Revolutionary journalist, a housekeeper, the cousin of a security officer killed in the clashes with protesters, and a man with injuries the Gate would prefer to keep quiet. Written with dark, subtle intelligence, The Queue describes the sinister nature of authoritarianism and illuminates the way that absolute authority manipulates information, mobilizes others in service to it, and fails to uphold the rights of even the faithful. I didn't say, I just remembered. So that's The Queue. I just remembered I didn't mention any of the translators for the other books. For Sahar Khalife, it's Aida Bamia. This one doesn't say on the cover. Was it written in English? Could be. Yeah, I think this one was written in English. Let me see the other ones. Mahmoud Darwish was translated by Ibrahim Muhavi. This one was in English. Let's see. Pessoa. I think I said it was Margaret Jewel Costa. Thomas Bernard was translated by, hold on, Ewald Osters. That's a very strange name. And Last is translated by Michael. Okay, I cannot. This is ridiculous. I feel like this is a conspiracy against me. Michael Hulse? Why? Why, Germans? Why? Or maybe he's not German. Oops. Whatever his nationality is, he's making my life difficult with his last name. Joke. So, I hope you enjoyed this vlog. I hope you enjoyed the books that I didn't buy. And I hope to see you in the next vlog. Happy 1st of May. And hope you are having a good rest today. And see you in some time. Bye.